Welcome to Speaking of Athletes. I'm Maddie. I'm a lawyer and athlete advocate, and I was also a collegiate lacrosse player and chaired the Division I Student Athlete Advisory Committee to the NCAA, or National SAC, while I was in school. On this episode, I am excited to be joined by Ishveen Anand. Ishveen is the CEO and founder of Open Sponsorship, the first online platform created to facilitate sponsorship agreements by connecting brands with rights holders like teams, leagues, and even athletes. She was listed as one of Inc.'s top 100 female founders in 2019 and Forbes' 30 Under 30 in 2015. Ishveen also captained both the college netball and cricket teams while attending Oxford University. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Ishveen as she shares her insights from the sponsorship space, how she and her team have been preparing to connect college athletes with deals once NIL opens up on July 1st, her thoughts on being an entrepreneur, and much, much more. So here is Ishveen Anand. You played sports at Oxford. Can you talk about what sports meant in your life?
Yeah, I'd say everything. So sports was the foundation for, I think, everything that I am today, whether it's, people say you're very confident or self-assured or you're a good leader. I also take a lot of failure as an entrepreneur, and you have to get up the next day. And I think so many of those attributes came from sport, whether it was, being a team player or, being a captain or individually working on yourself or going home at the end of the evening and knowing that you'd played badly. So I'd say so many of the skill sets that I use today and who are like part of my DNA came from playing sports all my life.
No, absolutely. And you talk about the idea of failure, I think, as a philosophy. Can you share more your thoughts on that? Because I think that's such an important thing for people to understand and kind of learn to pick themselves back up again.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's two parts to it. One is the post-failure, dealing with it, and one is not being scared of failure. And only if you are okay with failure do you take chances. And that's like chances on yourself, on people, on just doing, like making change, which I'm a big fan of, like change and being uncomfortable, knowing that you can't kind of control what's about to happen. And if it fails, I kind of always say, like, it's okay as long as you have no regrets. And
Right.
So I think failure with no regrets is way better than being comfortable and being one of those people that's like, oh, I wish I had done this, or maybe I could have done this. And so my philosophy on failure is like, it allows me to take more chances. Of course, I hope they're successful, but
Right, we all do.
Yeah, exactly. And then the post, I would say, is, it's not to say I don't take failure hard. I definitely do.
Right.
As an entrepreneur, like the highs are really high, the lows are really low, and it's so personal, right? Like
Right.
if there's a competitor and they say something about you, or like a customer leaves a bad review, or an employee quits, like these, like they hit the core of who you are. You're like, oh my God, am I running my company wrong or whatever else? So, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I wish I could take failure like slightly less personally, but you have to just get up the next day and continue, and you still have a whole team of people to deal with and all these other customers. And so, it's all about like, okay, is there a learning? And it took me a moment to talk transparently about failure. Like when I first started the company, I think I would like bottle it up and like hide it from the rest of the team members. And like, obviously that's not great. And so now, one of our values is transparency. And I'm really big on, if it's not good, let's share it. And if it is good, let's share it. Like praise where praise is needed, but like hard talk where it's needed as well.
Right. And that's such a growth mindset too, to be able to look at what's going well, what's going wrong, and address it. But I also completely understand the challenges of being an employer of any kind. My mom owns a business, and growing up, I would see how hard she would take Yelp reviews and different things and criticism, and I could see behind the scenes, how much care and effort she put in, how much she cared about her employees and doing what was right for the customer. And so that is definitely a difficult thing. But I think that transitions pretty well into my next question for you, which is, you had a passion for sports, and I think you got your start working in sponsorships. Talk about how open sponsorship came out of all of that.
Yeah. So, kind of fell into sponsorship. I didn't really understand it or know what it was about before I kind of took the job, but really fell in love. Like, I just thought, you know, you essentially buy your way onto the field of play. Like, you're buying your billboards are on, the winning play of like, the NBA finals or whatever it may be, or the Super Bowl, and like your representatives get to go to a box and like treat their kids and look like heroes. And so many of the benefits of sponsorship, whether it's like the signage or the other stuff, activations, like, I remember we did a KFC activation in one of my early tournaments, and like they had like this crane in the sky, and it was like eat KFC while being in a box in the sky, and it was just, I mean, the memories you're creating are beautiful as a brand, and I just thought, what an awesome form of marketing. But of course, like, the deal making in sponsorship is difficult. Like, it's not logical, it's not data driven. It's all about like who you know and the right time, the right place, the right person, the right pitch, and all of that. And so I was always kind of had this bit of me that was like, why can't it be easier to do deals? Like, this makes sense. Why are more people not doing sponsorship? Because they think it's too expensive. Well, why do we pitch a price and then lower it by 50% later? Like, why not be more transparent? And so fast forward, and I was also very interested in cross-border. I'd lived in India, I'd lived in, obviously, England, where I'm from. I'd worked in South Africa, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, West Indies. Like, I kind of worked all over. And so I was like, there should be a more connected cross-border system for sponsorship. The way that media buying is pretty cross-border. And so, one day, like about 6 years ago, I was like, right, why isn't it on Airbnb for our industry? I can create it, of course. So I went off to do that.
That's awesome. And can you talk a little bit too about just the difference between, U.S. college sports and sports everywhere else? Because it's, I don't think a lot of people totally understand who've grown up just immersed in college sports in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things about it that are so like incredible. One is just the sheer number. So just to put it into context, like, we are the largest marketplace globally, and we have 8,000 athletes, like, in terms of being a true marketplace that connects brands to athletes. I remember reading something about like Nike is the largest sponsor of athletes, and they have like 10,000 or something like that, right? College has 476,000 athletes, if I've got my numbers right. And like, the scale of this thing is so huge, where I remember I found out, like, very early on, I went to visit Yale hockey team because I used to play field hockey as well, and I was invited down.
Me too.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And basically, I went down to see the school, and I was talking to the girls about like thinking about sponsorship and branding and whatever else. And I remember learning, like, oh my God, like, this is a whole thing. Like, 50% of the students are female, and there's all of these sports that they can play, and it's really like a powerful machine. And obviously, so many of them don't go on to be pro. It's like, it's just a thing. And I just was like, I'd never really seen it anywhere else, because in, obviously, England, you kind of, football obviously being the biggest sport, soccer, you go to Manchester United junior camp, and then middle camp, and then senior camp, and then you go into the pro team. And at Oxford, I remember, like, maybe they were like, rowing is obviously fairly big, but like, you're talking about 20 people. And like, Oxford and Cambridge are the only ones that may have people going to like Team GB, and that's who only Olympic. So it's a different system. And then the other thing I remember reading about was, I remember watching March Madness very early on. So I moved to America 8 years ago. And so I would get all these lessons thrown at me. I'd ask this question. Someone would look at me as though I was stupid and then say something. And then I'd be like, wow. And I remember being like, watching March Madness. I was like, so how many of these players are going to go on to be pro? And they were like, maybe 1%.
Right. Crazy.
I was like, are you kidding me? The whole world, like the whole of America, is watching this tournament of these superstars. And you're telling me that only 1% is going to get drafted. Like, how is that even a thing? So those kind of things shock me.
Yeah, I mean, and it's such a big part of the reason why NIL has been a major discussion about why it would benefit college athletes so much, because they have this limited window, 4 or maybe 5 or 6 years that they can really profit. And especially for women who have so many fewer professional opportunities. So can you talk a little bit about, your recent partnership with Influencer and what you're starting to do in the world of college sports from your end?
Yeah, 100%. So for us, we're all about the deal making. As you can tell, I'm passionate about sponsorship, right? And so it's the way that we thought about college was all about, like, we know it's difficult to sell sponsorship. So, to give you a sense, we have about 70% of the NFL, maybe even 80% now, about 70% of the NBA on the platform. We have thousands of Olympians, and it's like getting them deals is hard work, right? And so when we thought about college, it was like, okay, who are the brands that are going to be spending? And then obviously you need to get supply and demand, right, as a marketplace. And there was a lot of conversations that we had with like commissioners and like different commissioners and different schools and whatever else to understand. And the rules are so hazy. Imagine like that Senate bill just came out on 1st of July. Like, how can you have something come into action within like 8 days? But obviously that's how it happened. So no one was ready to like really say like, this is the way things are going to be done.
Right.
And our platform is like, it's working, it's going for pro. We just extended to the UK, we're adding on some teams. So for me to like direct source it, like resources away and put them into college without knowing what was going to happen was really difficult.
Right. And I imagine scary.
Exactly, scary, and like, what's going to happen. And so when Influencer approached us and was like, hey, we've got this idea that like we're going to take all the transactions regulatory and you be the marketplace. And like, here's the integration, the tech integration, where it'll be one click for our 100,000 plus athletes to get into your system, sign up, and then be able to do deals. I was like, okay, cool, that makes sense. Because for us, like, supply is important, but honestly, like, the demand is the most important thing. Where are these brands coming from? Who can do deals? What can they do? How will payment work? How will contracts work? And so I love the influencer partnership because it helps us solve for supply. Having said that, it's not completely exhaustive because they might not have schools registered in their ecosystem because they're with competitors.
Right.
So we still have to think about, okay, what do we do, if they don't have a Georgia State, right, or whatever it may be. So we're thinking about supply, but I would say my biggest focus with my team is really thinking about how do we get, some of our clients are like Walmart or Levi's or Foot Locker, like how do we get these guys spending on sports right away so that these athletes are actually making money and it's not just a lot of talk,
Right.
and not much else, which is what I worry about, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a huge concern because I think a lot of the conversations have been around, that NIL will open up because it goes so much beyond just sponsorships. It'll open up entrepreneurial opportunities and creativity. And so athletes can do some really cool things, but that it's going to be the top athletes getting the major sponsorships. So I'm curious to know from you, what some of those conversations have been with potential sponsors and how you may be thinking about how to get deals to more athletes and make those appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because the way that open sponsorship works today is, so brands will come in and they'll put up like a campaign, like a job posting, looking for athletes with pets or looking for athletes in LA or, looking for athletes with diabetes. We're offering $500, $5,000, $50,000. We want you to do a social media post or an appearance or wear our logo on your shirt, and terms and conditions. And then the athletes and the agents get the right to like decide who they want to apply to. So they'll write a pitch and say like, hey, I've got a dog, he's great, like, this is my price, this is what I'm willing to do. And then basically our platform, within the platform, like the brand can send the proposal, contract, deal, everything else. What that means is that we have done $100,000 deals individually, but it also means we do product-only deals, right? Like I'm going to gift you a mattress in exchange for a social media post. And the beauty of a platform is you can do both, right? As long as you've got the functionality.
Yeah, that's cool.
So where we're at right now is we want to be able to service both ends. And for the top end, already our 8,000 athletes, about 65% are signed up by agencies. So we work with Excel, Rock Nation, IMG, like all those guys, as well as like smaller players as well. And so we know that like Trevor Lawrence, right? Like if he's available through his agent, he'll be on the platform. So we've got that covered. So now we're thinking about, all right, how the smaller guys and what does that look like? And honestly, when you think about, you know, Andy, as an athlete yourself, like if I was to say, cool, I'm going to give you a free mattress worth $1,000 and maybe $100 for a Instagram post, I think you'd be like, that's cool. Yeah,
I would have taken it. I had a lot of knee injuries in college. A nice
exactly.
mattress would have been nice.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Or it could be like, you know, one of our brands is Right Rice. They're like a rice alternative. Like if they were like, we're going to give you, you know, a couple of $100 worth of Right Rice, you'd be like, yeah, I mean, I'm spending money on food anyway. Like, so
Right.
I think we do anticipate a lot of like smaller deals to happen. But there's going to be a lot of value in that, not necessarily for us in the margin, but I think for the athletes. And also what we saw in the pro space was, you know, we had like lacrosse players or Olympians come in and they started off doing a couple of $100 deals. And then as they built their credibility, they got bigger deals and bigger deals and bigger followings and whatever else. And so I think our job is to make sure that people come in and there are opportunities for them, even if they're small. But of course, at the same time, yes, we also want to make money. So can we do some of those 10, 15, $20,000 deals as well?
That, you know, I guess to that point, you know, what is some of your advice for athletes in making themselves valuable to brands? Because you obviously interact with them a lot and kind of know what they're looking for. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I'll talk off our platform and then on our platform. So off our platform, of course, like it's a sad truth of today that social media profile, like your social media presence does count. I say sad because, of course, like if you choose not to use social media, like it shouldn't be a reflection of your net worth. You are a quality athlete on court, but it's a marketing tool and it is a sign of like how you can connect with your fans. And so there is an inevitability around that. I do think like you can choose that platform. So like one of the things that we do is emphasize like TikTok or YouTube or Instagram. It doesn't need to just be one. I'd say if I was a student, I'd say focus on one channel. It's better to have like one channel where you have like 30,000 followers than have like 555 on each one. I think in thinking about your content, like try and be the real you. Like don't just post images of you playing on the field. Like, you know, we already see like bigger endorsement dollars going to like the USA soccer team who talk about their partners or they talk about their lives and what they care about in life and whatever else. And that, again, going back to on-platform, it makes it easier for us for our matching. So we have algorithms that will look at what you post about, like, oh, if you post about pets, we'll match you up, or if you post about this. And so I think knowing a bit more about who you are. So I'd say those are kind of like some of the things off-platform and then off our platform, but then also like even in your feed, like using good content, using filters. And I know there's like a lot of people who are training on that. So I think that should be helpful. Within our system, imagine we're like a LinkedIn where the more effort you make in your job application, the higher likeliness you're going to get for a deal. And so for us, I would say things like write a good pitch, make it personal, price yourself. Like we have like suggestions for price, but maybe underprice yourself a little bit for your first couple of deals. Do things you're really authentically interested in, accept a couple of product deals, like do a good job with it, deliver on time. So I think there's a lot of stuff like in platform, and I really do when I think about it, liken it to imagine if you were just in a job process.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And an interesting point too about doing things that you're interested in. And I know you touched on, you know, the next wave of things that you personally even want to be involved in. And I know you mentioned social change and that sort of thing. You know, do you see a way to incorporate that as well? Because I mean, that could also be a really cool opportunity for athletes.
Yeah, 100%. We have a very cool feature coming out in our platform, actually, which is going to allow us to essentially track and reward you on how much you do for like CSR campaigns. Yeah, which will be really, really cool. And it does go back to, you know, I've obviously been running like open sponsorship for 6 years now. We're making, you know, multi-million dollars in revenue and it feels nice, but sometimes it is like, I don't want to be distracted from the company, but at the same time, like I want to do things that like feed my soul a bit more.
Yeah.
And so like
I
being
get
able,
that.
as you said, to like combine the two is key. And obviously the impact that our athletes can make is way bigger than the impact I can make. So if I can help to project, like bring products into the world that like connect not-for-profits with athletes and allow that to happen without, again, like you said, authentically, allow it to happen without payment, like the world is just a better place and way
Yeah.
bigger than what I could do myself.
No, I think I think it's amazing. And I guess to that point also, if you could talk a little bit about being an entrepreneur versus being a CEO, because I hear entrepreneurs talk about this all the time, that the transition between the two is a difficult one. And I think with more athletes who are looking to kind of dip their toes in the water there, what are your thoughts on that and advice that you have there too?
Yeah. I think the main thing is when you start out, you want to decide, and it can change over time, but really like, what are you looking to do? And I probably didn't ask myself that. I'm very tied to our mission, but I didn't really think about the company and growth and where I wanted it to go, like acquisition or IPO. Like I had no clue. I was like, change the sponsorship world? Yeah, sure. And so there are a lot of great entrepreneurs out there. Like your mother sounds like she was probably one of them. And they like, you have a lifestyle business and hopefully it pays enough for you to sustain your life. And it's a lovely thing that you do and it makes you happy. But it's literally just that. It's like your own little business. And then you have like, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and grow, my company to hopefully 100 employees, and that someday I'm going to sell it, and I know it's going to be a really hard ride, and I'm going to have moments where I'm worried about how we're going to pay our employees or whatever else, but like we'll get there. And I think like just deciding which journey you want to be on, because they're very different, and one keeps you as an entrepreneur, which means you can keep innovating and like doing your own thing and having flexibility, and one literally turns you into just like basically a people manager and a bottleneck solver kind of thing.
Right. So, I mean, I guess, do you see in the future kind of delving back into the entrepreneurial area? I guess that's always a question
Yeah.
looming.
I mean, when I do my personality test, I'm actually an entrepreneur, as like my, the letters that I do.
Yeah, me too.
So I do. If I can keep being an entrepreneur at Open Sponsorship, that would be like the best thing. Like I enjoy being a CEO. And I think what now makes me hopefully a good CEO, my team would hopefully concur, is the fact that I will look at what makes me not happy in my work or what makes me not be able to be a bit entrepreneurial, and I will find a way to solve that. So for example, like our first, apart from my technical co-founder, our first like VP hire was, his title is finance and operations. And that's because I was like, this is not me. I mean, I studied economics and management. Like I can do it, but I don't want to do it. And I'm not very good at like being in the weeds and the details. And so I think like that's an example of like, I could probably stay being entrepreneurial in mindset, because that is like, you hear of these companies that stop innovating and then you just get overtaken by competitors. Right. We are innovating all the time, and I would love to carry on innovating. But to do that, there has to be a web of people around you who are really good, like managers and operational people and builders and implementers.
Right. No, and I think that's such a good point, and I definitely empathize with what you're saying about being in the weeds. I mean, I'm a lawyer by trade, but I think I also was always kind of the weird one, and the one that the career counselors didn't know what to do with, because I was like, well, but I want to do different things. I want to do all these, more innovative things. Like working in a firm's great, but I don't think that's necessarily for me. And I think especially athletes and younger people now in college are starting to think more along those lines in terms of, what can I create in the world that doesn't exist yet? And I think NIL is going to be an amazing opportunity for getting educated while they're in school and while they can take more risks and sort of have something to fall on and people to sort of guide them along the way. So I think I'm really excited to see what they get to create in this world that really changes it in some really positive ways there.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be cool. But I guess I'll give you, any final thoughts you want to add, on anything that we talked about, really.
No, I mean, I was going to say on that point, I think, having said that, I would say like going out and getting some like real world experience, like work experience, I think is really valuable. I don't think we'd be where we are today if I hadn't done like a few years in consulting, a few years working for my boss within sponsorship, like watching people grow companies. So like, you have
No,
time.
that is a good point. That is a good point, because I do talk a lot about how I figured out what I didn't want to do
Yeah.
before I kind of felt like I was being guided in the right direction. And it was a lot of things that I was like, oh, this will be fun. This will be neat. And
Yeah,
turned
no,
out not for me.
100%. Exactly. I always say that whenever we have interns, I'm like, this is your time to figure out what you don't like, because that is, as
Yeah.
important. I think on the NIL stuff, like, obviously we're a leader when it comes to pro sports sponsorship, and it's going to be really interesting with college. Like, there are, even for us, like competitors popping up left, right, and center, people I've never even heard of before, and it could be the wild, wild west, and we actually have no idea. Like, are athletes going to sign up to 20 different platforms? Are some platforms going to take different brand strategies, or will it just be so confusing, or whatever else? And so I think, like, I'm also just trying to, and what will athletes even want to do? Like, do they want to do the $500 deals for an Instagram post, or is that going to wear off really quickly? Because, I don't know, like, they don't necessarily, do they need the money as much? And it's like a bit of a hassle. And then suddenly, like, people are chasing them, being like, make sure you do this, or like turn up on time, and they're working and they're studying and whatever else. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting. But obviously, if there's anyone in the audience that has views on where the space is going, or how we can improve, even how we can adapt, like, we're all ears, because we're basically building for an unknown. And yeah, it's an interesting one.
No, I mean, and that is a very good point too about, we just don't know. There are right now multiple states with different laws, and it looks like the NCAA is just going to throw its hands up in the air at this point, the 11th hour. But it is, you're dealing with just such an unknown commodity in every aspect, and I think my sympathy goes out to anyone in compliance and anyone working on campus right now trying to figure out how to help guide their athletes and all of that. And I think it's going to be an interesting new territory, especially because one of the things you mentioned was some of the athletes who don't necessarily want to have a social media presence, and I would have put myself into that category. I appreciated being in the moment where I was, and I felt, I think, more stress and pressure surrounding social media. And then I had teammates who were very active and did all sorts of things. But even when I was in school, Instagram was very new, Twitter was pretty new, and people weren't doing the same things they are now. And it's interesting to see just a much more savvy group of college athletes. And I think I have started to see people, posting about having preferences about certain platforms and that sort of thing. So I guess, are you trying to keep a pulse on some of that as well to see what those comments and feedback are at this point?
Gosh, that's such a good question. Not really. I obviously get a couple of them sent to me, but like, I honestly say, our competition is against ourselves on being able to figure out how to get as many athletes as possible deals. I just think a lot of, we ourselves have seen major companies before us have tried to do what we did and failed. And I think, like, today is a good time, but we've been doing this for 6 years, where you have like functionality, and we have 2.2 million proprietary data points. And so, not tooting our own horn, it's been difficult. Like, we've grown, but it's been difficult. I think the people out there who are like, I'm just going to create this platform, and it's like, well, brands today, it's so easy to go to Facebook and they spend $1 and they get $1.50 back.
Right.
They go to Google and they spend like $10 and they can see what's happening. You come to athletes and you're like, I'll spend $100 and what? Like, what do I get back, right? And that's one of the hardest things with sponsorship. And so I think when I think about where we're going, I'm just like, what can we do better? I don't necessarily look at what's around. And if someone figures it out better than us, and kudos to them. But like, we have an amazing team working on it. We've worked with some of the biggest like brands and the biggest athletes in the world. It's like figuring out how to do sponsorship for potentially 500,000 students.
Young individuals too.
Young students who are not managed by agents, or who may be managed by agents. I don't think anyone else has got the answer. I think it's a case of us having a plan and like measuring, testing. So I always say like our competition is against our own capabilities.
Yeah. I think everybody's going to be learning at the same time at this point and adapting on the fly. But I really appreciate it. And again, if you want to add, I know we kind of went off into another territory with, I appreciate the conversation. I think that there was a lot of really great information, and I'm excited to see what open sponsorship does and how this sort of evolves.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, please, any athletes, sign up, give us your feedback. We're all ears. Brands, sign up, tell us what you want. And anyone in the space who has opinions, like, definitely reach out. We do want to get it right. That was Ishveen Anand, CEO and founder of Open Sponsorships. You can follow her on Twitter @Ishveen Anand. And this concludes our episode. If you found this episode valuable, feel free to give this podcast 5 stars. Additionally, if you're interested in supporting the podcast, there's a link in the show notes, and I really appreciate it. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitter @MadSal15. And until next time.